Welcome to What Would Sabrina Say? I'm Sabrina Dong, and I'm excited you're joining me today. In this podcast, I dive into mental health topics on relationships and overall well-being. With over 20 years of experience as a licensed clinical social worker, I share insights and invite expert guests who are passionate about making a positive difference. I started this podcast because I was frustrated with the often misleading or recycled information in social media involving self-help and the mental health field. My goal is to provide you with genuine, useful content that's educational and informative. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you find our conversations both enlightening and empowering. I'm glad you're here. Hi, welcome to What Would Sabrina Say? I'm your host, Sabrina Dong, licensed clinical social worker. Today I have with me Deborah Segall, licensed clinical social worker, who's here today to talk about dialectical behavioral therapy in parenting and offering coaching, providing DBT tools. Thanks so much, Deborah, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm wondering if you could share a bit about yourself, your practice as a clinician.
Right. So, what shall we say? About 30 years ago, I was a young mother. My 4-year-old, we were having a really hard day. I was trying to get out to work. I was a teacher at the time, and teachers are supposed to know this stuff, how to handle children. But I felt totally stuck. He was refusing to get dressed. I had a couple other children under him, and I was stuck. You know, my automatic reaction were to yell, to threaten. I didn't want to do that. I love my child, but I felt like I didn't have the tools. And all I could do was just cry. And I cried all the way to work, Finally got him out, got him there. My co-teacher, I was so scared she would just give me this look, but she was so sweet about it. And, that kind of started me on this journey to learn those skills that I needed to show up with my children in the way that I wanted to show up. So it was a journey of about 30 years, and a few more children along the way. And I learned these skills. I started with books and took some classes. Then I went back to school to become a therapist. And that's when I discovered DBT, which sort of included everything good that I had learned until then. It was just a structured way to understand and to teach these skills to others.
I'm sure every parent listening could appreciate that some days are so hard and you don't know what to do and feeling those emotions and you could feel inadequate or so excited to hear about DBT tools and over 30 years, how it's helped parents and I'm assuming children of all ages as your children were growing, right? With different milestones, different issues that come up. So I was wondering if you could talk about just what DBT is.
So, I'm happy to talk about what DBT is. I just want to turn the focus a little bit to the mothers. It's starting with using these skills for ourselves and then teaching them to our children. Because really it's about modeling and creating that safe space for our children. And then, yes, we can teach these skills to our children. So that's where I'm like going back a little further from what you're saying of, teaching it to the children. We have to first learn it and practice it for ourselves.
So it's that self-regulation in order to do the co-regulation, modeling that.
Right. Exactly. You got it. Okay.
And understanding what our triggers are too.
Exactly. So that really connects to, explaining what DBT is. So DBT is a modality of therapy that put together by a woman by the name of Marsha Linehan. It was originally created for people that were engaging in real self-harm behaviors, suicidal behaviors, often inpatient therapy. Now they use it a lot in intensive outpatient therapy. This is for people that were really, really struggling in an extreme way with emotion regulation. So this is a really powerful method that has been found to help people with severe dysregulation. And what I discovered is that we all need these skills. Even if we don't need them on such an intense level, these are skills that help everybody. So it includes four modules. There's mindfulness, emotion regulation, distress tolerance, and interpersonal effectiveness. Now, for the parenting piece, for most parents, what I'm focusing on is we start with mindfulness, which could be translated as awareness. What's going on for me? What's going on for the child? And I can break that down a little more as we continue the discussion. And then we go to the emotion regulation. Once I realize how strong these feelings are for me, then I can actually learn skills. There are actual skills that I can learn that will help me lower that level of intensity so that I can use the interpersonal effectiveness skills so that I can help my children to do what they need to do in a way that doesn't rupture that relationship. So the distress tolerance is not so much what I'm focusing on here. I'm focusing on the other three modules mostly.
I was wondering we could repeat what those other three modules are that you'd be focusing on.
There's mindfulness, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness.
And so what's great to hear is, dialectical behavior therapy, sure, it was developed in helping people who might feel emotions intensely or at a time of crisis. But over the years, probably I think decades now, we're learning that it's just helping everyone's nervous system and everyone regulate during difficult times. And mindfulness isn't always just about breathing, right? Like you said, it's about being present, how to be in your body and in the moment. And I like to say it's kind of like widening that camera lens, taking that step back. Because some of our triggers, we hone in on whatever's frustrating us or maybe irritating in that moment. So it's always great to start with that and how to communicate what we feel. So great. What would be some parenting challenges or difficulties coping? Could you give examples on how this might help a parent?
So, the first thing that comes to mind is always bedtime, right? In speaking to parents, that seems to be the top challenge. And again, I'm not saying that I have all the answers. I have a 9-year-old and he gives me a hard time sometimes with bedtime, and I have to use these skills. Thankfully, I have these skills. So I feel like I'm a little bit ahead of the curve. He's my youngest of 10. So I've been there, done that a lot of times. So bedtime. Kid doesn't want to go to sleep. Okay. What's coming up for us? So I like to describe mindfulness as observe, describe, participate. Observe means noticing what I'm feeling in my body, where I'm experiencing that feeling. Is it a tightness? Is it like a sinking feeling? Like what's going on for me? And then describe, putting words to it, putting language to that feeling that I'm experiencing. What am I thinking about what the child's doing? He's just out to get me. Whatever feelings, I'm not judging the feelings. I'm just experiencing what's going on for me. I'm taking that moment to do that instead of just acting right away. And then the last step is the action, is the participate. Now, sometimes my feelings will be so intense that I cannot deal with the child yet. I have to take some time for myself. So mothers will say, but it's getting late. The kid's got to go to sleep. Most things in parenting are not emergencies, right? When there are emergencies, the strong reactions are appropriate, right? Child's running into the street, you better yell or run and grab them, right? But if a child's just not going to sleep at a time that you want them to go to sleep, that's not a life-threatening emergency, even though it could feel like that, because then they'll wake up late. We go into these spirals in our thoughts. So again, that's my example. It's bedtime, and what do we do?
That really stood out for me, and a great point is that it's not always an emergency. Bedtime is not an emergency, and we respond that way. We react that way, right? Versus being responsive, like the thermometer instead of the thermostat, right? Just anticipating. They go to bed late, I go to bed late, everyone's cranky in the morning, late for work, we kind of spiral, right? So great that there's tools, skills, acronyms to kind of remember and define the techniques. So bedtime is a typical one that parents find challenging and difficult coping for sure. Any other times that you find supporting parents around maybe teenage years, tween years?
So I'll tell you, although I've worked with clients that need help with the teens, my goal is to help parents to have such a strong connection and to sort of figure things out when they're under 12. I mean, now 12 is almost teens, but before, the child will forgive more easily. Well, little children give us the chance to really try to get things right in the relationship. Then the teen years become so much easier. because we already have that communication, that open communication with our child. But what is coming up for me with young children is often meal times. But teens as well, we want them to have a balanced diet, and all they want to eat is chips and candy. And that could be a real bone of contention, even with teens. That's the example that's coming up for me. But I'm happy to hear if you have an example that comes up for people that even personally.
Definitely.
I'm happy to address it to the best of my ability.
Sure. I think, social media devices, phones, that can be a difficult one these days for parents. It's a way that children communicate, right? Even through gaming. And so it can be hard to set boundaries around, especially.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a very common challenge that parents have. And really, with every family, it's going to be different what those boundaries are going to be. But just remember, our children, just like our children learn how to walk from watching us, they're going to learn about a relationship with social media and with devices from watching us. So how willing are we to put down the screen in order to communicate with our children or with our spouses? Kids are like little sponges. They take in everything. So, yeah, it could be a loaded conversation. Again, every family will have their rules and their boundaries. But no, my feeling is that even if the rules are a little bit different for the parents and the children, there has to be a clear understanding of why and why that makes sense.
Yes, I wanted to go back to what you said. We're talking about strategies and tools, and that's often where parents start. But dialectical behavioral therapy is also about the connection, right? And having that deeper connection. Wondering if you could explain about that, what that means. The bonds, the day-to-day communication, how would that be built?
So I don't see dialectical behavioral therapy to be specifically about the connection. Connection's more in the context of building a life worth living and having tools so that we don't rupture connections and so that we build connections. So that's where we get to the interpersonal effectiveness skills. There's one skill called the give skill. When we're starting a conversation with our child, we want to be gentle. The G stands for gentle, interested in what's going on for the child, I for interested. And then there's the validating. We want to be really validating. Even if we don't agree, we let them know that we get them, that we're with them in their pain, we're with them and with what's going on for them. But yeah, it's really hard to put down that device when you're in the middle of a good conversation. And we have a rule that we don't have devices at the dinner table. In other words, just to be really, really, even when we have to set boundaries, whatever those are in your family, but just be very gentle and interested and validating and easy manner. Be a little cool with your kids. Like, don't be so heavy, because that just makes for better relationships. I have a sense of humor.
Right. And that can sometimes be missed with the stressors of the day to day and just wanting to get things done. And it's really helpful for parents, I think, to show that they are listening and to validate. Sometimes modeling for kids that it's not about that means a no turns into a yes, but just feeling heard and being able to give input. I think a lot of people out there can or have experience growing up not feeling like they're heard or asked how they felt or were taught what to do with feelings even. Wondering if you could share why it's important for parents to work through their own emotions and their own triggers or stressors.
So that's a really very good specific question. I guess it's because when we have a hard time responding to our children, giving our children that safe, healthy environment, right? In other words, it's really work that ideally we should do even before we have children. But we won't even know necessarily where our children will trigger us until we have them. And, it's almost a gift that our children give us that they force us to work on ourselves.
And by safety, we also mean here not just physical safety, but like emotional or psychological safety, to be able to go to you to talk about things, to be able to feel vulnerable, to feel comfortable to accept that mistakes can be made. There's opportunities for solutions and growth, that kind of safety.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. I guess I'm coming from a social work perspective that creating safety in the room, creating safety in the home. And that's, of course, what I mean.
Definitely. So that's important to do that in the home environment as well, right? And if you're kind of always, like you said, tense, frustrated, easily upset about things, right? That can make it hard for communication and connection for sure. What are some ways that parents can regulate their own emotions using DBT?
So there are many tools and skills. One of the ones I like is called Wise Mind Accepts. So it's just these mnemonics just help us remember some of the things that we can do to calm ourselves down. I thought of something else. So we think about our five senses. And maybe that's easier for your listeners to remember. Five senses. So what are the five senses? There's this vision, hearing, taste, touch. Vision, hearing, taste, touch. Maybe we'll get to it.
Well,
Those are five of the skills that we talk about. In other words, what can I do using my five senses to calm myself down? Like what works for me? So when I work with mothers, we actually make a list of the things that we could do in the moment, things that are relevant, things that will work, that may work for us. Smell could be, maybe I have this perfume that I like. Maybe I have this lotion, and that involves, maybe I have some sweet smelling lotion, something that feels good. Just, just taking that time to rub our hands with that lotion, going to the bathroom, squeeze a little bit, it might put me in a whole new mood. We have aromatherapy, right? There's all these smells that really put us in a happy mood, in a calm mood. There's all these cool things that we could do with the sense of smell. That's just one example. Vision. Vision could be internal vision, what I can imagine for a moment, or it could be something that I actually look. We could put a nice picture of our child as a baby. Just take a look at that and just remember, this kid was once a baby. As annoying as he is now, this kid was once a baby. That would be one example of using the sense of sight to lower the intensity of the emotions that I'm feeling now. Then we have a sense of touch. I mentioned that idea. If you have something you like to squeeze, everyone has something that they find works for them, a soft pillow, a soft blanket, a squeeze toy, whatever it is, a fidget toy. That's an example of using, the sense of touch. Then we have taste. Now, everybody loves their chocolate. I'm not saying you should go binge on a whole bar, but to have something for those really tough moments, like a little piece of chocolate, that you really like, just take a moment, even just taking a drink of water. It's not the sense of touch. That's more like making space. It's a different skill, but even just drinking a cup of water makes a space and it can calm our system down. Then we have what else? Oh, the sense of air. So one thing I suggest to mothers is put together a playlist of songs that calm you down, or just things that she could say to herself, like a mantra. We'll get through this. They're only young for so long. There's so many things we can say to ourselves when we think about it beforehand, not necessarily in the moment. If we think about it beforehand, then we leave these sayings and go in places where we'll see them in those moments. That could also calm us down. Those are examples of things parents can do in the moment when they give themselves that space.
I was wondering, Deborah, if you could share what coaching looks like and the services that you provide.
Coaching isn't just about skills. Yes, I teach the skills, but then I stay with you as you implement those skills and I validate. It's so hard. We don't expect perfection. I want to be with my moms while they try this stuff out and report back and try something else and do it a little better. Over time, people find it just makes such a difference in their lives. In other words, I'm not being their therapist. If they need a therapist to work through the deeper stuff, that would be a recommendation. I am a therapist. I'm just only licensed in New Jersey and New York. So I know with my coaching, there are certain limitations. In other words, if I feel that this person needs more deeper work in order to be able to do all these other things, that would be my recommendation. Yes, we could learn the skills. And the goal is to learn the skills and to be able to function in our lives, even if we haven't done all the work, on our past traumas, right? That's my goal. But there are some people that things are so intense for them, they might not be able to yet.
I think it can be sometimes hard as parents to ask for support or assume it might take a lot of time and energy and effort, right? I was wondering if you had anything to say about that as a mom of 10 and maybe where to find that energy or if maybe reassuring about the process?
So I'll tell you, my feeling about skills that it only saves us time. Learning the skills and using the skills only saves us time. We're still spending the same amount of time interacting with our children. But when we interact in our children in a way that feels good and feels energizing, doesn't leave us, suffering from guilt at the end of the day, it will only give us more time and energy. And it's definitely a time commitment, but I don't feel like it's not time that we're already spending anyway. That's my perspective. And yeah, again, it feels very vulnerable. Like I should know this stuff. But you know what? We're all in this together. We all have to start from somewhere. And isn't it beautiful that we give our children this gift of getting the support so that we can do a better job, right?
I'm just wondering where people can find you or reach you for coaching. You mentioned that you are available nationwide to offer coaching service and where they can connect and if it's a group or one-to-one service. Just wondering more information there.
So right now I'm offering one-to-one, but I would like to give a gift to your listeners. I'll tell you where it's located. It's called parentingaudio.com. I'll tell you why it has that name because I feel like it's easier to remember than segallcoaching.com. But, they can check me out on segallcoaching.com, which is my website. But parentingaudio.com, they'll get, to a screen where they can enter their email address and I'll send them and they'll get access to my audiobook. I actually wrote a book called The Peaceful Parenting Solution. And then I made an audio version of it because many mothers requested that. And that's what I'd be happy to give to your listeners. So they could get a feel of what they would be learning and what they would be. Basically, it really goes step by step to what I'm recommending to mothers to do to help them stop those cycles of yelling and guilt and reconnect with their children. That's really the goal of this book and what I teach.
Amazing. I was wondering if you could share more of the book while we have some time, and congratulations on it and sharing your, knowledge with other moms. If you could share about Peaceful Parenting Solution.
So it's called The Peaceful Parenting Solution, your step-by-step guide to becoming a better mom. It's available on Amazon. It really takes you step by step. It starts with setting goals, figuring out what are your goals as a parent, figuring out what kind of parent you are. So there's different types of parents. There's the permissive, the authoritative, authoritarian, and then figuring out based on what type of parent you are currently, where the gaps are, where you need to go. And then we go through all the skills that I shared with you now, all those DBT skills. But it really starts with figuring out what our values are, what's important to us ultimately, and are we right now acting in ways that fit with those values? An example of that would be, value spending time with my children. I value, relationships, but am I busy on my screens the whole day? How can I change that? Right? What can I do? So that would be an example of figuring out what my values are. And based on that, where do I need to go? What changes do I need to make? Then we go through, all those DBT modules and how they apply to children. And then there's a section where it talks about how to give this over to our children as well. So that's I guess that's the book in a nutshell. It's very, very practical. At the end of each chapter, there's, what did I learn and what am I taking for myself?
Amazing. And it's always great to have a reference or resource to look back at or go back to. And especially if a parent's receiving your coaching and guidance, and to be able to refer to the book and audio, that's really helpful. Thanks so much for your time today, Deborah, and learning about your program and how helpful dialectical behavioral therapy or DBT can help parents in working through their own emotions and then helping their children regulate as well too in that process and, achieve those goals and reach the values like you mentioned. So we'll be posting your website and book attached to this episode, but would love to have you back if there's any other workshops or her books and accessing your expertise for parents.
It'd be my pleasure.
Thank you.